there, folks. Welcome to the channel. I'm glad you could make it because we have got a very exciting episode for you today, especially if you're into cuniculture. Cuniculture is when you raise rabbits for their meat, their fur, things like that. In today's video, we're going to be making a shredded rabbit stew that is absolutely delicious. Then we're going to freeze dry it using our Harvest Right freeze dryer and then put it up for long-term storage. There are a few things that you want to be aware of when freeze drying rabbit, so be sure to stick around to the end of this video. We're going to cover all of that stuff. Let's get started.
Let's get the vegetables together. We're going to start by roasting red bell peppers over an open fire till we get a nice char. Throw them in a bowl covered with saran wrap. And that steam that's created inside this bowl is going to allow that charred outer skin to just fall right off. Watch this. Just rub it with your finger. And now you have beautiful, very flavorful roasted red bell peppers. We're going to run this under some cool water to just go ahead and remove any of that excess char. We're also going to de-stem it and de-seed it, and then we'll give it a dice. Adding red bell peppers that are roasted to your recipe elevates the flavor. And for this particular recipe, it's going to be absolutely brilliant. So a quick dice, and then we can move on to our next ingredient, which is fresh parsley. Now, as far as the ingredients for this recipe, I mean, this is a loose recipe. You can just about add whatever flavors you want. This particular recipe was inspired by a fellow YouTuber, Scott Ray. You guys may know him. He found a rabbit in the road and whipped up a roadkill rabbit stew. And while we're not going to be using roadkill for this stew because we raise our own rabbits for their meat, I liked the Spanish inspiration that he had behind it. So that's kind of where the origin of this particular recipe came from. We're just going to go ahead and slice some leeks now. Leeks are going to give this a very nice, mildly sweet flavor. These are great for long cooks. And let's go ahead and dice our onion. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with rabbit, rabbit is an incredible meat. It has the highest amount of protein per serving than any other meat. It's low in fat and incredibly tasty. Raising rabbit doesn't require a whole lot of space and can be processed for food in as little as 70 to 90 days after birth. And rabbits, well, they breed like rabbits. Every 30 days, a breeding doe can produce a litter of kits that average roughly about 5 or 6 rabbits. We've had litters as big as 8, 9. We've had some as small as 2. So I consider rabbit to be a great protein. It got a lot of people through some very lean times during the Great Depression, and it's a great animal to have on your homestead. All right, so let's finish up with our diced potatoes. Now you can add carrots. Carrots is a very popular ingredient for your rabbit stew. We're not going to be adding carrots. We will be adding, though, a Spanish chorizo. This is a dry cured sausage. Now you could just as well add a fresh version of this sausage, but if you want to see how to make this dry cured sausage, check out the link in the top right hand corner. This is a great sausage. It has an elevated flavor because of the fermentation process and the 30-day aging process, and it's going to add a nice touch to our stew. Now, one thing you will want to know when you're processing meats for freeze drying, you don't want enormous chunks. So we're going to cut this up into small, basically quarters, and that's going to be perfect. So that's going to allow the rehydration of that meat to be pretty effective. There is the star of our show. We've got our rabbit. And farm-raised rabbit actually tends to be a little bit fattier than, wild rabbit, which is why ours has a little bit of fat on it. But that's going to render out during the cook, and it's going to be amazing. Now, when it comes to the belly, that's what I'm removing here. Don't toss that. This stews up beautifully. It gives you a great mouthfeel. It's got this lovely sticky quality. And let's go ahead and remove the saddle, which is going to be our loin right here in the middle. And then we'll clean up these little excess ribs that are right off the side. And there we go. Now, the saddle has a very thin layer of silver skin right on the top side that I like to remove. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very gently stick a boning knife or a fillet knife along the spine and then fillet that off of the saddle, just like so. Now, if you're careful and with a little bit of practice, you should be able to remove it without any problem. So we're going to go ahead and turn that around and do the other side. We're going to run that all the way down the back and then just carefully run that knife along the side of that loin. And when you lift both pieces up, the silver skin should be completely removed. And all you have is meat remaining, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. Check this out. Done deal. Beautiful. Very little meat removed. That looks amazing. Okay, that is how we butcher and get our rabbit ready for the next process. We've got our legs, we've got our shoulders, there's the belly and the saddle, and this looks incredible. now that our rabbit's been processed, what we're going to do is we're going to place this into a quick brine solution. Nothing complicated, literally just salt and water, and we're going to let this rabbit hang out in that brine solution for about an hour. This is a quick brine because of the amount of salt that we had. If you want to do a longer brine where you let it brine overnight, you would just reduce the amount of salt. All right, so there is our rabbit. Let's get our chorizo ready. This step right here is pretty straightforward. It's all about rendering out some of the fat from the Spanish salami, the Spanish chorizo. And this rendered fat is what we're going to end up browning our rabbit in. Not only is that going to give us amazing flavor, but it's also going to help reduce the amount of fat in our dish, which is going to help our dish freeze dry better and kind of guarantee that long-term storage. So once we've rendered out a good bit of that fat, we're going to go ahead and put that in the pot that we're going to stew everything in, and then we're going to add our rabbit. We want our oil nice and hot, and we're just going to cook each side until we've got some nice color. Once that happens, we're going to add our rabbit to our pot. Once we finish with the saddle, we're going to work on the legs, we're going to come back with the shoulders, and then we're going to do the belly, and then the vegetables. We've just added our crushed tomatoes. We've got our leeks and our garlic. We're going to come back with some white wine and some chicken stock, and that's going to be amazing. This smells incredible as it stands. And now that we've got that in there, we're going to add our potatoes, and then we're going to come back and season it. Now, like I said earlier in the beginning, you can season this however you want. In this case, we're going to be adding some salt, pepper, some coriander, some Spanish smoked hot paprika, and some sweet paprika. And we're going to give that a little mix. At the end of this cook, we're going to add our parsley, which I actually believe I forgot to film. Either way, that's going to come in at the very end of this recipe. So let's go ahead and just mix all those ingredients well. We're going to bring this to a gentle simmer. And once we bring it to a gentle simmer, we're going to give it a cover and let it stew. Now, unlike your traditional rabbit stew where you might cook it for an hour, hour and a half, we want this to be literally falling off the bones. We don't want to freeze dry the bones. And so I'm going to cook this for a little bit longer than you normally would, probably 2.5 hours. And that's what this is going to look like at this point. And it looks amazing. Like our meat is just falling off of the bones. And what we need to do now is separate the rabbit from the stew. We want to completely debone it. Having bones in your freeze-dried meal isn't really a good thing for long-term storage. Same thing with seeds. So we're going to debone that rabbit, and only the meat will be included in the stew. And that's going to help guarantee that we've got our maximum shelf life for this freeze-dried meal. It's going to be incredible. There's our finished product. We've got the bones on the left, the rabbit meat on the right. This was a total of 10 adult rabbits, and what I want to do next is just give the meat a little chop. I don't want huge chunks of meat in there. And the reason I do this is because it helps the meat rehydrate evenly, more efficiently when we add our hot water to it. You can add big chunks. It's not a big deal. You'll just have to let it, sit in the water a lot longer. So this is about what I'm looking for. Notice I still have some small chunks, and that's absolutely perfect for what I'm looking for. We're going to put that back into the stew and give it a mix. And I am just so delighted with the amount of meat we have. Our stew thickened up beautifully. We've got the potatoes and tomatoes and all the different herbs and vegetables and everything in here, and this looks and smells incredible. If you make this, don't forget to enjoy a delicious bowl of this rabbit stew. Now it's time to get these into our freeze dryer. So the first thing I like to do is weigh the amount of stew that goes onto the tray before we freeze dry it. That's going to be, let's call it our green weight or our raw weight. So I'm going to put my tray with the dividers and the silicone mat in there first, and then zero out the scale, at which point I'm going to add my stew and then reweigh it. And that's going to give me the weight of the stew alone. Now, this particular tray, we have a large Harvest Right freeze dryer, and this particular tray can hold anywhere between 6 to 7 cups. You can get slightly more when the liquid's a little thicker like this. And so we're maxing it out, and we're going to go ahead and put our divider. These dividers are great, by the way. We got it from freezedryingsupplies.com. I'll put a link in the description box if you want to check that out. All right, so now that everything's loaded up, we're going to go ahead and reweigh it. And our scale has been zeroed out to give us just the weight of the stew. And it looks like the weight of our stew, in this particular case, is 1,439 grams, and I'm going to weigh every tray that we put into our freeze dryer. All right, so let's go ahead and take this and pre-freeze it. It is highly recommended to pre-freeze your tray before it goes into your freeze dryer. I happen to have a blast chiller, so for me, pre-freezing is highly efficient. But if you don't have a blast chiller, just put it in your freezer for at least 48 hours and then transfer it to your freeze dryer. Having your food pre-frozen allows your freeze dryer to work more efficiently. All right, let's turn on the freeze dryer and let's hit the customize button. So the first thing we want to do is look at the settings. We're going to set the initial freeze temperature to -20 Fahrenheit. That's going to keep everything nice and cold during the freeze drying process. We're going to increase the extra freeze time to 5 hours. You can also increase that to 12 hours if you want it really, really cold. Dry temp is going to be 125 Fahrenheit, and we're going to set the extra dry time to 12 hours. In the event that it happens to finish in the middle of the night, that extra dry time kicks in, and when I wake up, I can take care of it at that time. So let's hit start. The machine's going to cool down. It's got like a 15-minute cool down period. Notice it says 69 Fahrenheit right now, so that temperature is going to drop over the next 15 minutes. And as soon as that 15 minutes is up, we can load our trays into the unit. Now, while that's happening, let me feel the rest of the trays that I have. We have 10 trays for the large Harvest Right freeze dryer. At any given moment, 5 are in the freeze dryer and 5 are in my actual freezer waiting to get put in. And so what we're doing here is we're going to go ahead and fill that up. We're going to put our dividers on there. And I love these plastic tops. These are also from freeze-drying-supplies.com. It allows me to cover them while they're in my freezer, and it makes for convenient storage, especially with things like stews. They won't spill out or anything like that. So this is going to go into my freezer. Our original trays, look at that. They're now down to -31 Fahrenheit. These are ready for the freeze dryer. We're going to go ahead and transfer them right now. And if you've ever handled trays, stainless steel trays that were -31 Fahrenheit, you definitely want to wear gloves, or at the very minimum, make sure your hands are not wet. Trust me on this one. Okay, into the freeze dryer they go. We're going to load up all 5 of these trays, and we're just going to hit start. And that's it. It is literally just that simple. The machine takes care of the rest. I'm going to close this down, and through the power of editing, we're going to get back to you once it's finished. And check this out. It's now done. The extra drying time has kicked in. Notice it's been drying for 62 hours. This finished around midnight last night, give or take, and it's now about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So we're going to hit cancel to stop the process and test to see if they're ready. And I want you to notice the sides of the wall here on the freeze dryer. There is a tremendous amount of ice buildup, and that's the moisture that was pulled from the food. That particular process is called sublimation, and it is incredibly fascinating. Okay, so here's our finished product. We're just going to test the temperature to see if it's done. What I'm looking for are any cold spots. If we have cold spots on our food, that means it's not ready yet, and we can pop it back into the freeze dryer and it'll pick up where it left off. But it looks like we are good to go. So all I'm going to do now is move this into a bin because I'm not quite ready to package this yet. I have another 5 trays that are freeze drying as we speak, and by the looks of it, those are going to take at least 2.5 days. So let me show you kind of some behind the scenes of what I like to do if I'm going to hold food for a few days, even a week, before actually putting them into the Mylar bags for long-term storage. I'm going to take this unit from EverDry, and this is a moisture absorber, and it's rechargeable, so it has a base that allows it to completely dry out. I'm going to take this particular unit and stick it into a bag, and that's primarily so it doesn't come into contact with the food. I'm going to take that and stick it into a pail that has a Gamma 2 lid on it. That Gamma 2 lid is going to prevent any kind of moisture from entering that pail, and that moisture absorber from EverDry is going to take out any moisture that might be in there already. And because this is a very temporary holding pattern, maybe a week or two, I don't need to worry about any kind of oxygen absorbers. So let's go ahead and put that Gamma 2 lid back on it, shut her down, and that's what that's going to look like. All right, the rest of our food is finished freeze drying, and when it was done, I wasn't quite ready to package it up, so I put it in another pail with a Gamma 2 lid, same as the first one, and a couple of weeks have now passed, and we are now ready to put this into our Mylar bags. So let me show you what I do at this stage. Basically, I'm going to take all of these little squares and weigh them once more. That's going to give me my finished weight. Having a starting weight and a finishing weight is going to allow you to figure out portion size as well as how much water to add to rehydrate it properly. Notice my finished weight is 1727. And I have figured that if I wanted a single portion based off of the weights, I need 60 grams of dry product. And then if I wanted a double portion, for 2 adults, I needed 120 grams per bag. And if you want to see a dedicated video on how to figure that out, how much water to add and how to figure out portion size, drop me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. All right, so we have our 60 grams. That is a single serving. We're going to now grab our Mylar bag. These are from the Sausage Maker. High quality Mylar bag, 7.5 mil, very thick. If you're going to get Mylar bags, just make sure they're no thinner than about 5 mil. All right, so let's go ahead and get that shredded rabbit stew into there. And if you want to break it up to get it in there a little bit easier, you could totally do that. This is what our single serving portion looks like. And this bag is perfect for a single serving. You're going to have to go bigger if you wanted to go double serving. At this point, we need to add an oxygen absorber. And truth be told, I probably don't need a moisture absorber in this little pouch, but I'm going to add one anyway. But you definitely want to add an oxygen absorber. That's at the very bare minimum what you need to do long-term storage. And then let's seal it up. And that's it. Harvest Right does send a impulse sealer with their freeze dryer, which is incredibly handy. And you're going to need something like this in order to seal these thick Mylar bags. So now that we've got that all sealed up, let's go ahead and label it. And there it is, our freeze-dried rabbit stew. My instructions simply say remove the O2 absorber and the moisture absorber, add a cup of boiling water, and then let it rehydrate for 10 to 15 minutes. I love this part right here. Good through 5/4/48. That is awesome.
All right, that's how we prepared and packaged our shredded rabbit stew for long-term storage. At this point, we've got a 25-year shelf life. I mean, this is absolutely brilliant. Now, we are going to rehydrate that here in a second, give it a taste, and see if it's anything like the original version. But we were able to do this entire process because of our Harvest Right freeze dryer. So if you're into emergency preparedness or long-term food storage, maybe survival food or camping food, maybe you want to entertain the possibility of starting your own freeze-dried business, but you haven't gotten a freeze dryer yet, I'm going to put a link to Harvest Right's website in the description box below. You can see all the different sizes that they have. They accommodate a lot of different price points. And I gotta say, this machine is absolutely brilliant, and I can't wait to share more recipes with you. And depending on when you're watching this video, right now, we're in the month of May 2023. They're running an incredible sale on all of their sizes. It's like their Black Friday in May sale. It's definitely worth taking a peek at. All right, let's rehydrate this rabbit stew, give it a taste, and see if it's just as good as the day we made it.
All right, let's see what this stew tastes like after it's rehydrated. First thing we're going to do is remove the O2 absorber and the moisture absorber. And like I said earlier, moisture absorber is technically not necessary, but the O2 absorber absolutely is. We're going to put that into a small bowl, small enough to fit just one meal. And then we're going to add our hot boiling water to the tune of 1 cup. Now, if you want it a little thinner, you can add more water. If you want it a little thicker, you can add slightly less water. Just make sure that your original recipe is not too salty. Otherwise, it's going to seem kind of salty. Once we're done, we're going to put a cover on that and let it rehydrate, in this case, for 10 to 15 minutes. Now, every freeze-dried meal is going to rehydrate slightly different, so you're just going to have to experiment to see what works for you. But this is what it looks like about 12 minutes later, actually. And I got to tell you, this looks amazing. Absolutely beautiful. It looks exactly like the stew that we prepared. Nice chunk of rabbit right there. That looks amazing. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and put this onto a plate with some rice. You know, this Cajun eats rice with everything. Rabbit stew is no exception. Oh, that looks good. That smells good. And look how much food that is. I mean, that's only 60 grams of dried rabbit stew rehydrated with 1 cup of boiling water. That is a lot of food. That will fill someone up. That could fill 2 people up. All right, let's take a bite.
Freeze-dried shredded rabbit stew. Let's give it a bite. Wow. That's delicious. I mean, that tastes exactly like the day that we made it. The potatoes are incredibly tender. I mean, no loss of quality. The rabbit is flavorful, tender, juicy. Overall, I give this a 10 out of 10, and I hope you get a chance to make it. If you have any questions on how to freeze-dry food or this particular recipe, leave a comment in the comment section below.
And I just wanted to show you that we ended up splitting our serving size into single servings and double servings. What you're looking at right here is our double serving bags. This is a slightly larger bag for 2 adults or one really hungry teenager. Anyway, we ended up getting about 15 double servings, 30 single servings, and it was incredible.
Thanks a lot for watching. If you're new here, take a moment and click that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. If you got something out of this video or if you just thoroughly enjoyed it, a great big thumbs up is always appreciated. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.